في أكبر الكتب.
All right, so now we're back with part two here, where now we get on to the part of Massive Attack's catalog, in which I am going to be reviewing what I consider to be the big three. The albums that I consider to be essential listening, even though my view is going to go against the grain of mainstream popularity. So those three CDs are Mezzanine, A Hundredth Window, and Heligoland. Now, these three albums are where they started to get more exciting with their aesthetic, and they shook things up with their formula in ways that were more to my liking. So, in other words, if you do not like these three albums, you are not a true Massive Attack fan in my eyes. And yeah, you will see that as we move further into this review. I just have such a special attachment to these three that this is how I always took in Massive Attack's music. You know, this is how I became so obsessed with them to the point where it was like there was there's very, very few electronic albums out there that could reach that level of protection or that level of perfection that those three have. I mean, Boards of Canada's Geo Gaddy would be like another example of one of those electronic albums that does reach that peak greatness for me. Um, you know, there's definitely others out there for sure, but those, of course, I will have to save for a separate review altogether. But Mezzanine was what's the album where the collective started to take their sound in a darker, more gothic direction, fusing alternative rock into their trip hop sound with the addition of heavy clanging guitars and a more menacing tone, but also sounding more primal and more nocturnal in atmosphere. There's obviously still as big of a fan base out there for Mezzanine as there was for Blue Lines, so I'm obviously not alone in this. There's obviously maybe even more fans out there of that album than I know about, but it's obviously an untouchable gem that you know, most people will say that that was the peak of Massive Attack's greatness, and then they jumped off the train after that, which is a tragedy. It's it's pretty sad because their next album, A Hundredth Window, was and still is my favorite Massive Attack album to this day. If I was hard pressed to pick just one, it would be A Hundredth Window, which was more of a down-tempo electronica album with elements of glitch. It turned out to be one of their most beautiful, sublime albums ever. And I'll obviously, you know, get into why it's my favorite album of all time later. But I do have to say that I got to share a personal experience with A Hundredth Window. I was at an acupuncture session one time and they didn't have the overhead music playing because usually they have like some soft new age music playing. And it just so happened that like the Bluetooth wasn't working. So, you know, my acupuncturist recommended that if I had any music of my own, that I should just put on my earbuds and listen to it for the duration of my 60-minute session. And I chose 100th Window because it is such a peaceful album. It just puts my brain at ease when I listen to it. Like I can just sink into this pool, this tank of water that's filled with like these molecules and atoms, and it's got this very, very silver, um this very, very silver metallic type of look. I mean, look at this album cover, which I know is a depiction of a glass statue that was shattered. And well, I mean, I'm gonna get more into the artwork about that later on. But it's like, I mean, even the back artwork here, I just think it's got a very, very, serene, like being left alone in a laboratory type of feel to it. And honestly, it's like not the sort of thing that creeps me out. It's like, because was going through some healing at the time from, trauma, it just makes me feel like this is the sort of album that Neo in the first Matrix movie would listen to when he had like that acupuncture like session after he was freed from the tank that he was in, with like the millions of other bodies that were being used as like electrical energy to power the Sentinels when the Nebuchadnezzar came to pick him up. And um you know um uh Morpheus was telling him, welcome to the real world. And then, eyes close, eyes open again. And then you see Morpheus and Trinity looking down at Neo as he's like on this table and he's got all these needles in him, um, to help him to, restore his fluids to his body because of all the time that he was spent with tubes in his body in various different places. And you know, Neo says, my eyes are hurting, or my eyes can't work. To which, Morpheus responds to him very emphatically, um, you've never used them before, and then, laying a hand on Neo's head and saying, it's okay, Neo, the answers are coming to you. So, that whole experience right there is pretty similar to what I experienced on the acupuncture table that one day back in 2022. And listening to 100th Window on that day, it was really peaceful. The atmosphere in the room was just nice. Wasn't too hot or cold, just a very nice steady warmth. It was also cold and gray outside too, so I needed this album to really lift my mood. And I say this, against popular opinion because most people consider 100th Window to be like the coldest and most depressing album. But my goodness, when I listen to that song Every When, to me that is just like, oh my goodness. It's like I've just reached, seventh heaven right there. But anyways, moving on to their 2010 album, Heligoland. That album went for a more gorillas-esque approach. The animated trip hop group Gorillas, led by Damon Albarn. That album, Heligoland, is very similar to Gorillaz in that it creates an almost avant-garde, almost cartoon animated musical venture. And, each song would stand on its own and be its own entity, rather than just like flowing together like, Massive Attack's albums usually would. Before I get into breaking down those albums, though, I will need to bridge the gap a bit because there is a 3-year gap at least between 95 and 98. And I need to at least talk about Tricky's departure and his solo career, at least the chunk of his solo career during those years. And so therefore the albums that were released between Protection and Mezzanine, he was a very integral part to the collective in their early years. And I followed his career at least through his first three CDs here. Max and Quay, Nearly God, Pre-Millennium Tension. And I remember getting all three of these CDs. Well, at least Nearly God and Pre-Millennium Tension I got for maybe like $2 because they were like, ah, my goodness, in the 75-cent range for both. Max and Quay I had to pay a little bit more for at Half Price Books. That I had to pay, I think, $4.99 for, but I mean, that wasn't breaking my bank. And so for me, those three albums, they saw Adrian Thawes going in a more abstract direction that was akin to musique concrete in his own idiosyncratic way. Music that is buried in tape loops and samples with just the faintest trace of melody. Although when the melodies do come through, they are often rather interesting and they do generate a variety of different feelings. Max and Quay was his most popular album, which still holds up to this day as among his best amongst many dedicated fans. It was his debut album that he collaborated on with his partner at the time, Martina Topley Bird, who he actually met while she was still a teenager at the time. And they had a kid together or two. And they both contribute vocal duties. Tricky usually brings in that croaky, demonic vocal tone to bring in the isolation and the angst, while Topley Bird was the sweet siren that brought light and feminine softness that was just a really good counterpoint to Tricky. And Tricky's even talked in interviews about how she he needed her. Like she was literally the Yoko Ono to his John Lennon, like a very special muse that without her, the glue would not hold together throughout the course of this album and future albums that would follow. Well, though I have to do a Wikipedia check because I know that she wasn't on all of Tricky's albums. But at least I know she was on the ones throughout the 90s, all the way through Angels with Dirty Faces, I believe. But anyway, songs like Overcome, for example, are just a great example of why she was such a special singer. And I mean, that's pretty obvious given her future work that she would do with his old bandmates later on their 2010 album, Heligoland. There's also a song called Black Steel. Black Steel shows that she had a flirty, soulful, and sensual voice that brings, a smooth edge to the otherwise, thrash metal inspired guitar work that just gives the song a lot of fuel, a lot of energy, almost like something you'd probably hear in a Mad Max movie. And surprisingly, even Alison Goldfrapp appears as a guest singer on The Ghostly Beauty, that is the song Pumpkin. That's always a pleasant surprise when it comes on. I'm a fan of Alison Goldfrapp as well, too. I like quite a bit of her work that she did with Will Gregory. Uh, I think it's pronounced Abayon Fat Track, another song that it's a really nice, got a nice reggae rhythm to it, very subtle usage of raunchy sexual language in the lyrics. Um, Listen to the song and you'll know what I mean when the lyrics come up. It's a really, really dirty, horny song, but very innocent sounding too. You Don't is another nice song. That has a really nice thumping drum and bass beat to it, and honestly sounds like something that I would hear in the movie The Fifth Element. After that, then, his next two albums went into more darker and more haunting territory. I still like them a lot, even if most fans decided that Tricky was just a one-off and that his work after that didn't exist. Lightweights. I actually find myself enjoying Nearly God, which is, in fact, infamously an album that was never billed under Tricky's name. Like Nearly God is the name of his moniker for just that one album. Um, Although I obviously see and hear it as a Tricky album all the way. I always loved the song Poems. It's got this very dark, ambient drone vibe to it that sounds like a music machine, like winding up, and it's just very faint and distant, really, really distorted out. But it's beautiful sounding in its own dark, strange way. And there's the one light on this song is the solo acoustic guitar that's played with the collaborative vocal duties of Tricky, Martina, and guest singer Terry Hall, who is the one who sings the one that kicks off the song with these half woozy lines that include, the line that repeats at the end of each verse. You promised me poems. It provides a little sunshine in an otherwise dark room, which, like I said, sounds like a detuned music box whining, kind of like, this heartbeat of sorts that's just making this room feel more alive. I guess it's a dark love song written in Tricky's own demented and way out there sort of way while still sounding really sincere. And then there's the two songs that feature Bjork on them. The first song is what you would essentially call a remix on first listen, but it's actually more like an alternative version of the song as heard through Tricky's psyche. The song Keep Your Mouth Shut is basically Tricky's own S&M response to Bjork's You've Been Flirting Again from Post. Not really all that surprising to hear Tricky use one of Bjork's songs on here, since the two did collaborate together on that remix album Telegram, which was basically Bjork's own remix compilation of tracks from Post. That's a great CD, by the way. Highly recommend that. The the song Keep Your Mouth Shut begins with a sample of a Das EFX song and him rapping on the song Dedicated, which is the song that features the following lines. Well, if the honeys think I'm shut up, no, if the honeys think I'm stuck up, then tell them shut the fuck up. I'm obviously not a rapper, but well, if the honeys think I'm stuck up, tell them shut the fuck up. Anyways, yeah, it's like the song is depicting Tricky's state of mind, hearing the Bjork song as a dialogue indicating some previous episode of attempted courtship that ends in power struggles. You know, one of those situations where you like a girl so much but she plays these power games with you. And instead of being the type of girl that satisfies your ideal fantasy of what you want her to be, it's like like listen to the lyrics of Bjork's song, where she goes, all that you said was true. Give her some time, give her some space, And essentially this song is Tricky's response to that. It basically has Tricky responding to those lyrics, which are otherwise mixed very far away in the song, and they sound like this ghost of the girl that he was courting at the time. And basically, the lyrics in this song are essentially an inner dialogue that's going on in Tricky's head. You better keep your mouth shut, babe, next to your chest. So he clearly is like trying to think of himself as this dominant that's taking control of Bjork inside his mind. The fact that Bjork's voice is blurred out of obscurity mixed so far down that it sounds like, it's she's calling down from a distant memory of sorts. And then the song Yoga, the other Bjork song, flips the power dynamic around. We now have a remix of what I think is a remix of Tricky's Hell is Around the Corner from his previous album. At least the words being manipulated in Tricky's idiosyncratic way sound like that song. You know how that song goes? So they juice me, seduce me, dress me up in stews. Yeah. Well, here he's rapping, I'm no mystic. She treats my tastic. In this very weird nursery rhyme sort of way that just sounds very disturbing. Anyhow, the song is being heard from Bjork's point of view, with her writing down her own lyrics over that. And it's got this really strange piano, or what sounds like a piano, or I guess like somebody like running a a rake or a brush over the strings of the piano. Um, and just putting it on loop constantly. I have no idea why this song is called Yoga, because you obviously cannot be on your mat doing down dog position listening to this song. And it's got no relationship to Bjork's future song off Homogenic, which is also called, well, it's spelled Joga from the looks of it, Joga, but I guess it's the Icelandic variation of yoga. I'm not sure. Um, anyways, um, one other song I have to talk about too on this album is the Depeche Mode cover of Judas, which is rendered into a warp and twisted version that sounds like it's coming from a universe where musical form is broken down into antimatter. Guitars twisted and broken down to just creating drones and strange cosmic melodic lines like a song being transmitted from some strange alien underground city beneath the streets. So those are just a few highlights listed as favorites of mine from Nearly God. Pre-Millennium Tension was released the same year as that album, 1996. And that one marks the final transformation where now the sunny melodies and the sexy trip hop beats of Max and Quay, released the year before, are replaced with more sinister, more threatening soundscapes of cyberpunk gangster beats, brutal industrial sounds that sound like a mechanical dragon, and even a closing instrumental called Piano, of all things, which is pretty discordant sounding, even though it tries to make the natural use of a piano. You have songs like Vent, the opening song from that album, which is a classic example of the claustrophobic atmosphere that you get dropped into right from minute one, right from the first second of that track. You have this this beat that sounds like like an air conditioning unit that's broken, like the fan inside is just shuffling and scraping about. It's very brutal sounding, as I had described earlier, sounding like a mechanical dragon. Look at the title itself, and you get the idea that um this song is meant to like keep you trapped with alongside with Tricky and Martina, who are exchanging the same vocal line back and forth. Can hardly breathe. Can hardly breathe. Another song, Sex Drive, has a similar thing going on too, with a pretty similar destructive beat going on and a quasi blues harmonica immersed in the sound, the fabric of sound itself. It is more fun and more funky to listen to, and not the anxiety-ridden inertia that Vent has. It's much warmer, it's much more inviting, even if the beat still has that cold, mechanical, visceral nature to it. It's more distant, it's away from, what would otherwise be a pretty good and pretty sweaty nightclub song, in my opinion. Granted, if it was played in a nightclub populated by freaks. And, the album does have some more gentler songs on there. I had mentioned in the first part of this review, Christian Sands is on here. And that's obviously um, Tricky's most well-known song, which has been used in quite a bit of film and television. It's 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 very it's very nocturnal, but in a way that it feels like you're walking down the streets with just some distant light from a light pole illuminating your path along the way, as if you're making your way, you're making your trek across town to some uh you know underground, like some underground base where you're meeting a bunch of people, spies that are you're going out on a secret mission with. It really does have a spy movie feel to it, actually, hence why it works so well on the first season of 24. And then there's the song Bad Things, which is a very disjointed, almost dark drone piece, which sounds like a walking shadow cloaked figure with a limp as the melody kind of stumbles at times. That bass and electric guitar blends together both pleasure and pain that just blurs the line of emotional delivery. Yeah, and I love it. It just sounds like it's being played from a vinyl record, and it crackles and has this lo-fi vibe to it that borderlines on black gaze, but without the black metal side to it. Just a dark shoegaze sound with a very sexual tinge to it. Although it's not exactly the angelic, ethereal vibe that you would hear from a My Bloody Valentine or a Slow Dive. It's like the song is beautiful and sexy, but it also creates a sense of terror and dread. Like there's some dark depression and emotional deprivation and isolation that makes you feel vigilant of any danger that may come your way. It's actually my favorite song on the album for all those reasons, which really just leaves, I mean, without, going into a full album review, the only song on this album that's really the most beautiful and most peaceful, like the oasis on the album, is the song Makes Me Wanna Die, yeah? Which is which approaches a love song, sung very soulfully by Martina Topley Bird again once more. I like the lyrics to this song. It's clearly it, it kind of reminds me of the lyrics to Porcupine Tree's Sleep of No Dreaming. Like the lyrics, you try to learn the universe and can't even converse in universe. You know it's ironic, smoking hydrophonic. I mean, these are some very prog rock inspired lyrics to me. I just get that feeling off of it. And oh gosh, I just love how sweet and even syrupy this song is. It's very sentimental and melancholy, but in a very candid way um that really honestly I haven't heard on any of Tricky's previous two albums. So, but yeah, so anyways, that's my brief rundown of Tricky's first three albums. And then, there's like Angels with Dirty Faces that came out in 1998. I still haven't listened to that one yet. I haven't really listened to any. The only album that I did listen to post pre-Millennium Tension was the album Vulnerable, which came out in 2003. And I actually didn't like that album. I only listened to it because I loved the song Hollow so much. The Italian female vocalist, I can't remember her name offhand, but she kind of reminded me of Hope Sandoval, who would sing with Massive Attack on a couple of occasions. And so I liked it because of that, but uh, much of the album just sounds a bit too new metal to me, and actually a bit betrayed that Tricky decided to go in that direction. But I don't know. I mean, maybe the rest of his discography isn't like that. Obviously, I've mentioned that there is a song um, from 13 Ghosts that I like. I know that he wrote a song for this movie with Kate Beckinsale called Broke Down Palace. I have yet to see that movie. Um, but yeah, okay. Now let's finally get down to talking about Massive Attack. So with Mezzanine, Tricky was no longer with the collective, and that obviously wasn't a detriment to Massive Attack. If anything, they started to go in a bolder direction. This album shows the collective in a more confident, more assertive, more edgy manner than before. And yet, this album is still just as calm and dreamy in just as many places. Hence, highlighting not just trip hop, but also shoegaze and dream pop music, as will also be indicated by some of the singers, the session singers that were brought in um, on some of the songs here. So why is Mezzanine such an important album to me? And why do I call it my number one favorite album of all time? Not just in electronic music, but the entire history of music overall. It all starts with my definition of music. Music, as I understand it, is the primordial energy that is channeled vertically through the human bioelectric system, which generates this field of potential that makes possible a means of bridging the animal with the spiritual mind. Put simply, this album is pure sexual energy manifested through sound. Even if I have yet to have sex with a special woman while listening to this album in the background, the music alone sublimates such raw bestial energy, and then lifts it to a level of the divine or Godhead. This album is very tantric, and devotees of Tantra would agree that this album is magic. Binaural waves of orgasmic bliss, where light and dark are dancing with one another on a cosmic movie set. So let's get into the track by track breakdown, beginning with the first song, Angel. Like the sound of an alien pulse, a low, rumbling bass comes murmuring out of the darkness, followed by a clicking metronomic beat with this very mesmerizing echo on, the hi-hat skin. As you know from having watched part one of the Massive Attack artist spotlight, this song, hearing this song once I pressed play on my CD player on a summer night in 2007. I went into exclusive detail about that night when I first put on this CD. This, as you can see, just a plain orange disc here, but with lots of incredible stuff packed within, packed within its laser binary imprinting. So, despite that, there's always something new that I can get from listening to this album. And this first song can still conjure up a myriad of descriptions and stories for me to tell. Like when Horace Andy comes on with those lyrics, they are almost like some nighttime shaman chant. You are my angel, come from way above to bring me love, to bring me love. When you are listening, what you are listening to here is a song that personifies some spiritual courtship where the angel in question is a dark seductress that is very soft at first. And then she gets demonic and wrathful as the drums start getting heavier with reverb soaked skins and crash cymbals raising the cacophony volume up a few notches. I mean, even the next few lyrics describe, this shape shifting quality to the angel in this song. Her eyes, she's on the dark side. Neutralize every man inside, every man inside. Until Horace sings the mantra over and over. Love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. And then boom, a blaring electric guitar comes out like a wraith, creating these rapturous chords of ecstasy, which sound like sheets of beautiful noise with some cool start stop chords pulsing at the end of that first phrase. For the entire 6 minute and 18-second run, this song builds up heat and tension like a rapturous firefly or a glowing moth, and evolves, from chrysalis to the its final stage where its wings spread and it starts flying outwards, to enter into the city at nighttime. And then one instrument after another begins to drop out. until you're just left with that pulsing electronic drum beat. And then silence. Now, the next song, Rising Sun, follows up with a more slow burn type of tempo. It's more spacious and it feels like you're moving in slow motion or even coasting and floating in zero gravity. Del Naja and Grant Marshall trade vocal duties here. Del Naja Robert Del Naja sounds like he's rapping in a lucid dream state. He sounds like he's in a narcotic daze, a hypnagogic state that reflects the dreamlike soundscape of the music. Whereas Marshall here is a bit more grounded, but even he sounds a bit sleep deprived despite being more in the front of the mix, with more of that bassier, low baritone voice of his and rapping at a higher volume, whereas Robert Del Naja appears to be swimming almost unnoticed under the din of bass and enveloping, haunting vocal chant samples. It's like his voice is almost a whisper. And his lyrics sound pretty indecipherable too. Every time I hear that one line, we would struggle through the dub days, I always heard it as we would struggle through the dog days. I'm not kidding. That's what I always heard whenever I heard that. Anyway, and then every other verse or so, the last line would end with "Dream on," and then just fade into the background. It's such a moment that is alternately haunting and beautiful. Hence, of course, the dream pop influence here. So on to the next song, Teardrop, the one song that everybody at least knows or has known at some point. So, you know how I was saying that this album is very tantric in nature? Well, it's because I have a personal story to share regarding the song Teardrop. So, back in 2015, this song was playing in the background during a massage therapy workshop that I was attending at the time. It was just like playing on, some like satellite radio station. And, it was like when the song came on, I just thought to myself, how about that? Now, not that everybody in the classroom really cared, just that it was to my surprise that I heard this song and found it to be quite a compliment for the class course material, since it provided a pretty peaceful, embryonic mood setter of a song. Actually, there was one girl in that class who took notice of the song and a few other songs that had a similar aesthetic. And I remember her remarking that it sound like, in her exact words, it sounds like we're having a trip hop playlist going. Anyhow, this is the type of song that you listen to while indeed you're doing massage or painting a picture or even in the salon while you're doing somebody's hair, getting a color, for example. I mean that Elizabeth Fraser, who sings the vocals on there, it just provides that perfect lullaby-esque vibe to it that I feel can put anyone into a peaceful state of mind. Now, Elizabeth Fraser, of course, is the lead vocalist of legendary dream pop band Cocteau Twins, whose career ran through the 80s and up through 1996 before splitting up. And, I'm uh I'm I haven't gotten too deep into Cocteau Twins discography. I do like them. I'm not a hardcore fan of them. Like I know there's definitely a devoted fan base out there that really loves this outfit and even goes so far as calling Elizabeth Fraser the voice of God. Yeah, some of that is justified, but I mean, that's not to say that their discography is flawless. If anything, some albums are better than others. Treasure was a pretty good one. Um, The Moon and the Melodies, which was that collaboration that they did with Harold Budd. I like that one. Especially the first song on that album, which appeared in Whitebird and a Blizzard, which I do believe I did bring up in another review, sometime back. Um, For me, though, Four Calendar Cafe is my favorite album by them. That's definitely their most underrated album at that. Whereas like Heaven or Las Vegas, I don't really care for that album. Four Calendar Cafe just hit the sweet spot right there as far as like their very ethereal, spiritual brand of dream pop and shoegaze music. So they're definitely good, but I'm not obsessed with them. Now, here on Teardrop, Elizabeth Fraser sounds different than her famous career-defining band because her words this time around come out as intelligible. There's no complex, indecipherable singing where it's more about the syllables and the sounds and the way that she makes her mouth move while singing them. There's actual words to be heard here, and they are quite lovely and poetic. Now, I know I've said a lot about the instrumental arrangements in my first video, so I have no need to elaborate on them again. Just go watch my first video and you'll see my first thoughts when I first heard this song, especially my exposure to this song initially through watching the TV show House MD, starring Hugh Laurie. Now, on to the next song, Inertia Creeps. After that final weighted piano chord that brings Teardrop to its blissfully teary-eyed coda, we now get a song that is more wild and savage. Though it all opens up pretty calmly with a flurry of what sounds like just gorgeous shimmering guitar looping that sounds like the aural equivalent of city lights glittering around you as you drive through the city of Milwaukee at downtown Milwaukee at nighttime, or like when you see the stars twinkling beautifully. And it seems like a very romantic atmosphere at first. And then the real action begins as some Indian instrumentation comes in to create a shaking trance that gets your skin tingling and goosebumps rising up. And then after a brief Indian flute, I think that's what it is. It's either that or a violin, plays a brief instrumental seg. A clasping African drum pattern comes dancing in. Just with some of my favorite lyrics that Robert Del Naja has ever chanted. Recollect me, darling, embrace me to your lips, two undernourished egos, four rotating hips. Hold on to me tightly, I'm a sliding scale. Can't endure, then you can't inhale. Clearly, out of body experience. Inner fears and dreams of flying, I feel it nearly surrounds me. Though I get lonely slowly. And then, of course, that chorus line. Inertia creeps, moving up slowly. Inertia keeps moving up slowly. It's just that really nice, almost whisper in his voice. She comes moving up slowly. She comes moving up slowly. I actually made a video at my gym back in 2018 where I did a dance choreography to this, like 2018, 2019. And it's on my other YouTube channel, Lotus Globe. I'll put the link to that video down below for you to watch. This song is very erotic, and you can tell that this song is meant to create a space for seduction, courtship, and foreplay. Like it rolls its tongue out at you. Very, very sweaty and animalistic. And there's a reason for why that is. So, full disclosure, Robert Del Naja has admitted to being a porn addict, and the lyrics are a commentary on his preferences for sexual voyeurism, or even like his own personal sex life too. But he loves his pornography. He admits that he loves watching people having sex and him having sex himself. Which is why it's no small wonder then that in 1999, the year after Mezzanine came out, he would team up with Liam Howlett from The Prodigy to compose the score for a very unconventional porn series called The Uranus Experiment. And the music for that is actually pretty good. You should actually check out, um, you know, um, I'm going to put the link for that song too below. There's two songs specifically written by Robert Del Naja and Liam Howlett separately. I don't know if they write a song together, but I'm definitely going to include their input for that movie. Yeah, I really like the music. The music video for Inertia Creeps is supposed to have a lot of symbolism that is suggestive of sexual voyeurism, even though there isn't any explicit content in the video itself. So now, after this, we get to the first instrumental on the album called Exchange. This is basically an intermission, which, it's like got like an elevator music vibe to it. There's really nothing about this track that keeps you engaged. It's just a dreamy, I mean, semi-ambient song based on a sample of Our Day Will Come by Isaac Hayes, containing some tape manipulation and this very deep, resonant phaser effect that sounds like the song is putting you into a zone where all time disappears and you're just left to relax, free floating as your mind goes wherever it chooses to. And you definitely think that this song is going to go on into infinity with this infinite loop that it has going on. You think it's going to go on forever until you experience a sudden interruption where a 1 to 2 second symphony bit begins to play on constant loop, almost like a skip, making the recording sound screwed up until it fades out. And that in turn fades into Dissolved Girl. To me, the song that defines the high point for me on this album. The peak experience that I always look forward to. So the way I can describe Dissolved Girl, if Inertia Creeps was that hard, rough, sweaty sex, just the very, very primal, raw fucking that goes on in bed, and whatever like BDSM activities and play scenes are going on. Dissolved Girl is the pillow talk and the sudden emerging second wave, which contains more slow, sensual sex. So Inertia Creeps is more like hardcore, but Dissolved Girl is more softcore. So you get this whomping sound that starts out the track that reminds me of like a motor of some sort. it comes in, it begins the track with this slow simmering heat. And then there's this slight electric guitar playing very sparse notes, dee 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 dee, along with another deep bass. And then the sultry, yearning voice of Sarah J comes in like a stripper who happens to be a singer as well at, doing some karaoke in between acts. Now, there's no images of Sarah J going back to 1998 that I know of. She's very much an unknown. And as far as I know, was known really for only this song. Her face only emerged on the internet at the beginning of the 2020s, I believe, when she started a YouTube channel and actually did a redux of this song, but just with acoustic guitar and vocals. I don't know why she retains such anonymity, why she remains so mysterious. I mean, even Elizabeth Fraser, who's supposedly known for being a private person, everybody knows her, at least even on a surface level. Okay, so I actually checked her YouTube channel and I noticed that it's been active since 2013. So only 15 years after Mezzanine. March 25th is when she started that channel. And oh my goodness. Then there's those lyrics to Dissolved Girl that get me feeling like Sarah is whispering and flirting in my ear, and it just drives me crazy to the point of me feeling just so boyish and blushing. Shame, such a shame. Think I might have lost myself today. And say my name. Need a little love to ease the pain. Need a little love to ease the pain. And she really sounds like she's in pain, but the pain of yearning, of anticipation, of wanting to be, edged close to orgasm, like wanting, you know, her euphoria to be pushed to the edge of coming. It's just so sweet and so juicy. Especially, when you get to the part where the electric guitar, comes in with the same sort of intensity, in fact, even more intensity than what you heard on Angel. It's like the guitar work on this song, Dissolved Girl, is just a lot more, raucous, a lot more pounding, but also very, very sexually charged. It's like at this point, now the two lovers have warmed up to each other after enough caressing and um tasting each other, feeling each other's sensual waves. It's like now, you know, it's like the female is ready to start riding his cock. you know, and um oh yeah, I love this song so much. So then following that, and after collapsing into a heap of sweat and melted giddy pleasure, just really, really juicy orgasmic embrace, Horace Andy comes back to the mic again with a song that brings more of a laid back, lazy vibe, as we are now being led into the second half of the album. It's only fitting that this becomes sort of like a doorway into a more darker, more mysterious half of the album now at this point. where it's like the mysteries of the night become more deeper, much more investing. It's it's a song that really makes you feel like, the full moon is out, and um it's it's the type of song that when you listen to it, it's the type of song that you play after you've had sex, where you go outside onto your balcony, and both of you are just glowing like fireflies, and you and your lover are outside looking at a bunch of other fireflies twinkling about, while you gaze at the skyline of the city buildings lit up like a starry sky had drifted down to blend into the structures on the street level. You know, it's, that feeling where now, you've opened up to the wonders of what your love together brings along with this night. The song itself has some pretty lighthearted humor. Well, I should say accidental humor, to say the least, because there's lyrics. There's a lyric in this song where Horace Andy goes, "Always a fussin' fight." It's supposed to go always a fuss and fight, but I've always heard this lyric as always a fussing fart. And I'm not alone in hearing that. There are other fans out there that have left their observations on forums out there that they hear this exact same lyric too. My goodness. Andy's vocals really fit in just nicely here, though, because it sounds like he's doing an open mic on a dark stage somewhere, but he's unseen, existing mainly as a performer in the back of the minds of the two lovers, just enjoying the view of the stars with that feeling of, "Ooh, honey, babe, isn't it just magical tonight? There's a man that lives next door in my neighborhood, in my neighborhood. He gets me down. I got to get away from here. This is not a place for me to stay. I've got to take my family. We'll find a quiet place. I think I've also mentioned that John Bonham's trademark drums from Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks are sampled here, along with 10:15 Saturday Night by The Cure. That part where it goes drip, 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 drip is basically a slowed down part from what Robert Smith sings on that song. So yeah, the next track then, Black Milk, is when things start to wind back and get even more relaxed and more sleep inducing. It's like, your biological clock is starting to slow down as you start going into a hypnagogic state. A song that sounds like it's played at the stroke of midnight. And Elizabeth Fraser returns again to deliver a very haunting vocal performance, and a very different one from Teardrop, which was a lot more sunnier. Whereas here, this is more of like a very dark lullaby that she's singing. It's a quite an experience listening to this song. It really is quite an experience. It's like you're in this den of this great moth's cocoon, and there's only this very faint glow that is your only light source. Kind of like the after image of the fireflies that I was referring to earlier from the previous track. It just leaves this ghostly glow about. And you can kind of sense like the presence of this great moth entity, but it's just in sleep mode at this point. Those are the types of images that are conjured up for me, anyways. Interesting considering that a future track on Massive Attack's next album would be called Butterfly Effect. But there's also something too about the artwork that I think Black Milk kind of refers to, because inside the artwork here is this very very obvious Rorschach ink blot design. And that's probably supposed to be emblematic of the moth imagery that the song Black Milk conjures up, for me, anyways. Ah, yes. And now we reach the title track. And this is where we are now climbing under the floor of the moth's hive and discovering this strange basement full of mysterious machinery thumping and knocking. That's how the beats for this song sound, with the very faint yet dense effect that they have, sounding shoved into the back with a low pass filter while also defining the actual space of the song's performance being played. It's like the beats of the song create a very specific type of gravity, that you get pulled into, and it just raises up this vast magnetic field that the song plays within, and you are at the center, taking in like this quadraphonic sound. This would actually be a great song to hear, in a surround sound context. Robert Del Naja and Grant Marshall sound really sinister on here. And the interpretation of the lyrics for the song are quite interesting. I was doing a little bit of investigating online as to what the lyrics for this song specifically mean, especially when using the metaphor of a mezzanine. And a mezzanine, see, is this half space, kind of like a mini balcony of sorts in, an apartment complex, for example. It's like what you get, when you walk down a stairway from like this one level, but it's in this entire housing unit. And, um, so you walk down the stairway, sometimes you have like spiral stairways, for example, that lead down onto a certain personalized floor. And the mezzanine itself is supposed to be symbolic of like casual sex. It's like, those moments where, a quick fuck is supposed to anticipate um, a greater and more deeper emotional bonding and intimacy. There's definitely some power play going on here, and a bit of a silent struggle going on, where it's like the female in the relationship, possibly a hooker, is creating a means of controlling the needs of the male counterpart, but still keeping him at a distance, so as to not achieve any sense of real feeling between the two. The man here is anticipating that somewhere there is an actual bottom of this space, where the actual genuine relationship can happen in a floor and a room that holds breathing space for both. Henceforth, the repeating line, all these half floors, all these half floors. That's the mezzanine. It's a half floor, but it's like, when do you get to the bottom of all these mezzanines where it's like you can actually have a home, a genuine home? Henceforth, why there's that lyric on here. Okay, yeah, the lyric that I was looking for here was, all these half floors will lead to mine. And then there's a line that accompanies that goes, we are the curious. So you can see when you listen to this song that this song is about what it is to truly get inside another person's psyche, to really get beyond just casual sex, to get beyond the hookups, the fuck buddies, the friends with benefits, and really, really experiencing some soul connection, experiencing something that is eternal, um, and transcendent. And the fact that no matter what, you're always going to be unraveling this mystery. These floors within floors of another person, henceforth the mezzanine. Honestly, this is like the most perfect love song. Well, you could even call it a love song that is enmeshed with a spiritual dimension to it. It's it's actually quite a powerful and profound song when it comes down to really understanding the narrative going on here. I mean, it's like I was saying at the beginning of my review for this CD, Mezzanine is a tantric experience through and through. And now, since we're at the point in this review where I'm talking about the title track, this is the gateway into the secrets therein that lie within the sonic landscape of this album. The curtain is being pulled back, and the eternal mysteries are finally unraveling between self and other, between physical self and corporeal self, body and soul. Like, there's nothing generic about the way all these different words are being used here. It's what can I say? This is exactly the reason why this is my favorite album of all time. Really, really is. This album isn't just a great musical experience, it is a great spiritual experience. It's like it supports my belief system. It's like, you know that famous phrase, like, love is my religion. Well, since love is in fact my religion, then this would be played at my tantric temple of the arts. And now things get even weirder with the next track, the which is in fact the longest running track on here and the longest song that Massive Attack has ever committed to disc, at just 8 minutes and 13 seconds. This song is basically a sprawling opera piece. I mean, I'm not saying it's an opera song, but it's like it's got an operatic structure to it. And the story behind this one is also quite interesting. There is an interview out there from Grant Marshall on either YouTube or Vimeo. I used to know the source of where that interview was, and I had listened to it. And he discusses the story regarding a man who is working a graveyard shift job, which, as I discovered from some other sources here, is a security job. It's it's about, well, in fact, Robert Del Naja in Q magazine says that it's about a security guard who decides that in order to have complete control of his life, he fucks off his friends and family and just lives around his shifts. Totally regimented, no compromises. So it's about, a man seeking like complete and total autonomy and control over everything in his life by isolating himself from all social contact and just making his job as a security officer like his way of life. Kind of a relatable track, for a stoic to listen to, as it is a song that really seems to glorify isolation. Liz Fraser sings again on this song, and it actually turns out that it is two separate Elizabeth Fraser vocal performances spliced into this song. I swear, it's like the title track was this dark fever dream, while this track is basically a wake-up call back to reality. Yeah. Now, obviously, the male lead in this story never achieved the sort of realness within an otherwise casual relationship with whoever the prostitute or the sex worker in this story, or some random girl that he met at a dance club, that he had a one night stand with. What he had hoped for in the previous track, Mezzanine, um is unfortunately now a fantasy that never came true. And so this track shows the same male character going back to his routine job, making a living, trying to survive on his own, and having to control his personal world through work in some sort of Saturn, Cronus, archetypal framework where his life now is essentially keeping his eye on the clock. It's the very, very sort of typical lonely man story, where the whole night watchman archetype plays a role here. Desire now becomes these random ghost phantom intruders inside the building complex that the security guard is supervising. And there is this need to lose that control and find liberation. He's constantly yearning for it. But at the same time, he also knows that, like, you know, this is his life right now, is just a minute by minute, second by second, hour by hour observation on his life and maintaining as much structure as possible amidst the chaos of desire that occurs outside of him. I guess you could say this is like a musical version of Maurice Blanchard's The Writing of the Disaster, in a sense. In fact, Maurice Blanchard's fragmented style of writing comes out in the structure of this track because the track, while it is over 8 minutes long, it doesn't really flow as if it was like some progressive rock sort of track. It sounds like it's pretty much a patchwork of at least maybe 3 or 4 songs. And I know that I was reading into how this track was recorded and um how like Robert Del Naja and Grant Marshall would commit their parts of the track and then, send off those pieces of the song to Elizabeth Fraser so that she could record her vocal bit. And it would be this back and forth network of the song being put together. I'm going to end up having to do a separate video where I analyze this track in depth because there is so much to this song and the history behind it. And it was written in separate sessions that were stitched together, so the final product sounds like multiple songs in one. Stereolab's Refractions in the Plastic Pulse was written in a similar fashion, I think. The structure of the song is somewhat incomplete, as it appears to be. I've listened to this song hundreds of times, but I still can't get over how it seems to go on this course that ends up leading to this anticlimactic oblivion. I mean, it starts out um, pretty dark with this um, very silent, sort of looped um guitar work. I think it's definitely got to be guitar work on there. But then it goes into this very, very um dark. Like this is like the point where it gets to be like the darkest point of the album. But it's the song, moves along at this very, very slow, very, very nightclub sounding pace, with bass and drums, giving it that sort of underworld type of feel to it. Um, and it's even got, some, I think there's like well, there's definitely African percussion in here, but I think there's also like a little bit of harp as well, that's being played alongside with Elizabeth Fraser singing. But it's the electric guitar that leads this track. When it comes in, it has this strange wah effect, these really snaky lead lines that are being played while appearing to be filtered through some watery phaser effect with some toggle switch action to give it that stuttering Doppler effect. And then it's strummed out later on with these blocks of chords that just sound really, really hot and seething. And then later, Liz and Del Naja are singing back and forth toward in this battle, where it seems like the male protagonist is fighting for control against the phantom force, trying to control him and erode the solitude of his workplace. And the volume of the guitar gradually gets louder in intensity as the chords are being pounded out until finally it just ends with what sounds like the faders now being turned down all the way really rapidly, leaving just a faint echo of the song resounding for a bit after. And then the final track comes on, and it is just a reprise of the song Exchange from, a few tracks earlier, which now serves as a reprise to close out the album. It's like now the nightmare has suddenly been lifted and the light of day starts to flood through the room as you feel, that you feel isolated in. This time around, though, this particular version of Exchange has Horace Andy coming in and singing actual lyrics over the Isaac Hayes sampled song, as if, now he's bringing full circle the narrative of this album, which in fact, um, I should obviously bring up the lyrics here. So it's a song where like when you look at the lyrics, you see a man's face, but you don't see his heart. You see a man's face, you will never know his thoughts. Everywhere you go, um, there's a man to say love. Um, when you look at these particular lyrics, it's um it's a song that I think now when being played for the second time just gives more commentary once again to the artwork as I showed earlier, the Rorschach artwork that's in here. The song itself seems to be a visual representation of this, as if like Horace Andy is trying to tell the listener, you know, if you fall in love with somebody, yeah, you know, never, you know, never just take a person at face value. That there is definitely this constantly fluctuating and fluid psychic material. Like in how Antero Ali in his book Angel Tech always referred to the human body as like an imprint of the unconscious mind. Well, that's what Horace Andy is essentially saying here in these lyrics, you know, where it's like you can look at a person physically, but you'll never truly, truly know who that person is until you are ready to step into the mystery of that other person. I particularly like how this song ends, with the vinyl scratching on a really, really strange loop repeating itself over and over again. Um, yeah, it's a great way for the album to close out. And yeah, then it gradually fades out. And that's finally everything that I have to say about Mezzanine or Mezzanine as a whole album. So yeah, with such a stellar and immortal classic, it's rather interesting how this album and its following tour would break Massive Attack and cause Grant Marshall and Andrew Vowles to leave, leaving Robert Del Naja as the sole member left to keep the Massive Attack moniker intact, pick up all the pieces that were left behind from the other key members that had left the band who were together for so long. Now, Robert would spend the following year after Mezzanine's release composing the score for a rather intriguing three-part pornographic film project called The Uranus Experiment, which he would do in collaboration with Liam Howlett of The Prodigy, since he himself was also taking a break after his big beat band finished touring for the album The Fat of the Land from 1997. Also a really great album, by the way. Love that one. This was a rather unusual project in that it was actually filmed in zero gravity using a parabolic flight on a shuttle. So that meant that when one of the male actors would ejaculate, his cum would go floating up in the air like a a Milky Way inside the shuttle. Or if Sylvia Saint was riding on a guy's penis, the two naked bodies would appear to look balloon like in their movements, and just the whole zero gravity momentum. There's this something about it that was just rather strange, to say the least. It was definitely a very different niche in the pornography world, and something that was only done once, I believe. So the music naturally had to match this. So going down the tracks that were used in this film, of which there were only three, the song In Flight sounds pretty cheesy, to be honest. It doesn't have much melody, and it relies on this sequenced pulsing two-note motif playing on a loop over and over again with variations in percussion and some alt rock guitars with wah pedal effects. Not really, the Mezzanine style guitars, which sounded really, really cosmic and rather beautiful, but just rather, herky-jerky sounding, where clearly, the whole textural tapestry of this song was made to only be soundtrack music, as the intricate layers that Massive Attack are known for are not present here. Well, and this is only Robert Del Naja working on his own. And so yeah, because that was only a solo cut from 3D, um we also have another song that is a Liam Howlett solo song, and the song is called Titan. This song is better in that it is a it is um the melody is a lot more interesting, and it's got a really really mysterious, kind of like light industrial atmosphere to it. Kind of like an instrumental Depeche Mode song, when you think about it. And it's also pretty hot listening to it, since around the 3.5 minute mark, you're treated to an ASMR dubbing of female moaning and orgasms. Probably some solo masturbation or passionate missionary style sex going on, since there's noticeable kissing going on as well. But clearly, you have to watch the movie and have an open mind to know exactly the purpose as to why these sex sounds are being mixed into the song. So, um, if you're feeling pretty kinky, yeah, definitely check out the Uranus Experiment and find out, the context in which this song is played. But meanwhile, the collaboration track between the two DJs is titled No Souvenirs. And it turns out that this song was also supposed to appear on the soundtrack for the 2000 movie The Beach, sounding Leonardo DiCaprio, which I haven't seen yet. And personally, I've known about that movie for, well, probably since it first came out 25 years ago. But I do want to read the Alex Garland book that the movie was adapted from, before actually diving into the film. This song, No Souvenirs, has more of a trance vibe to it, and it kind of sounds like a darker version of Paul Van Dyke's classic Time of Our Lives, which actually showed up in a couple of movies in the mid 2000s, like Into the Blue and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. The drums, they do hit hard on here, but at the same time, it's got a very, very lush and chill acid house jungle like melody to it. And Robert Del Naja's vocals sound both really slithering and sinister, but also quite sexy. Yeah, you know. Now, in doing my research for projects that 3D had been doing in between Massive Attack projects, such as the Uranus Experiment, um, I actually came across this other rather obscure collaboration between him and Damon Albarn of the animated trip hop band Gorillaz. And ironically, Damon's fictional moniker was 2D. Now, how is that for a musical pairing that the universe was destined to make happen? And as it turns out, Damon Albarn would show up on Massive Attack's next project. The song uh, that the two guys collaborated on was One Day at a Time, and it was used in a movie that I also have not seen. And actually, my first time hearing about this film since I saw the song in my sidebar on my YouTube page is from a movie called Ordinary Decent Criminal, starring Kevin Spacey, from 2000. It's a nice indie number, and it's got a bluesy rhythm and Damon's gospel-like vocal singing the title over and over while also adding Sweet Jesus at the end of each line. It's hard to make out that Del Naja actually worked on this track, as it sounds more like a Tom Waits song more than anything. And I can certainly hear how this could have been a Gorillaz song, as it had been a demo for a future track on Demon Days. I mean, hypothetically speaking, it would sound like a demo track that would turn into something that would show up on Demon Days, which came out in 2005. A great album, by the way. You know, I'm obviously a huge Gorillaz fan, and I have all their albums, well, except for their first one, their eponymous debut. But everything else from their catalog I have on my phone, and it hasn't left my playlist for over a year and a half now so far. There is inevitably going to be a part three to this discography review because I feel I need to do justice in highlighting all the individual songs that various Massive Attack members have done separately or as a unit. You know, individual members off doing their own projects, or Massive Attack songs that were released as singles or B-sides. Anyhow, moving on though. So, we move now to a project that has always been my personal favorite Massive Attack album for the longest time and has kept a special place in my heart for all time. A Hundredth Window. It's this crystalline light temple generated by waves of minimalist ambient techno that is a complete abandonment from trip hop altogether, yet it still maintains Massive Attack's musical identity by taking that dark, instrumental, mysterious beauty of Mezzanine and lifting it up to the ethereal and transcendent. It's an album that is crafted on a heavenly plane and sounds like it creates a glass temple as a conduit to channel angels and other supernatural bodies. This album also marks a first for Robert Del Naja in that he actually sings this time around. He's left his rapping voice behind and now sounds like a Tom York clone, yet with a softer, almost whispered tone. And as you would predict, both him and Tom York would collaborate like decades later. Um, so it's no surprise that this album was single-handedly put together by Robert himself and often seen as a solo album, but it's very much a Massive Attack album to my eyes and ears. And Horace Andy is back again as well, where he offers his singing on what I consider to be my favorite song of all time, Every When. So yeah, let's begin the track by track breakdown on this underappreciated 2003 gem. So, first off, I gotta highlight the first three tracks on this album as being one of the strongest three-track sequences on any Massive Attack album. The album kicks off with the song Future Proof, which begins with what sounds like a bleeping sequencer, that, um, putting out just almost like this Morse code type of element to it. But it definitely sounds like a sequencer pattern, followed by a minimalist crystalline electric guitar line that adds to this miraculous, you know, like sense of an android awakening. I mean, like looking at the album art in particular, if you consider all the imagery that lies wherein, it's pretty clear that this glass dummy is supposed to be like, haha, dummy. See what I did there? Portishead reference. um, but like it's supposed to be emblematic of like a soul that is, that as you can see, that has like certain experiences marked on it that have often shattered it into fragments from the larger whole. And you constantly see just on the cover, ongoing themes of like this glass man or woman shattering. Um, and it looks like, it's even primed with explosives. I'm not even sure, what it is. But I definitely feel like there is some sort of metaphorical circuit board, that is sounding underneath one of these androids. There's like a thermometer tube measuring the temperature of its energy generator. And then, of course, there's Robert Del Naja, who starts to come in singing almost in a very whisper like mode. Borderline case, reinforced glass, this, ooh, it's really, really chilling. Um, and there is a certain quiet intensity that just gradually builds up, to this track. Um, Especially, after um I would say after the line where he goes, "We can be numb, we can be numb, passing through." Oh, and by the way, um the song before it changes starts off with this 4/4 drum pattern that sounds slightly um almost offbeat in a sense. Like there's definitely nothing very, very, straightforward about the drumming. But in particular after Del Naja sings passing through, then it's almost like, this light starts opening up inside this glass figure, this glass human, or android or alien, whatever it's supposed to be. Um, and then the guitar, if you really listen to it, it is pushed back in the background, but it just is really ripping out this incredible shredding solo, unlike the likes that I've even heard on Mezzanine. It's trying to see who it is that's playing guitar on here. Let me see here. Angelo Bruscini. I think he was also on Mezzanine. I'm not sure. I mean, that name does sound familiar. Damon Reese is the one that plays the drums. And John Harris has that very, very deep bass line there. It really, really is a Massive Attack album through and through, even though this clearly has Robert Del Naja's imprint on it, aka 3D. So, um, but yeah, there's definitely at least two times in the song where it sounds like, the heat, is just it's like a Bunsen burner. It gradually creates this vertical like flame. And that's probably, what Del Naja means the second time around towards the end of the song where he sings real thin air. Then, you start hearing this, it almost sounds like a laser, trying to pierce through metal, just listening to it. Um, and then things get, build up in texture and intensity and dynamic until, everything just drops out and then you hear that boop, boop, that sequencer pad pattern ending the song. And then after it goes silent, you hear Sinead O'Connor's voice coming in. At first sounding very, very ghostly, sounding as if, it's his her vocals are on a loop. Very, very slightly stuttered, almost like a signal cutting in and out of her voice. And that's what begins the second song on this album, What Your Soul Sings. Personally, um, this song has been a grower, to say the least. I'm still not entirely hot on the lyrics, um, as I do think they just sound, like your typical feely good, um, 80s, um, new wave vibe to it. Because I mean, Sinead O'Connor's career goes all the way back to the 80s, but the way she sings it is just really ethereal, really otherworldly. So it's like, even, when I look at certain lines here, like, um, your mind can never change unless you ask it to lovingly arrange the thoughts that make you blue. Actually, those lyrics are pretty nice. They have kind of a new agey sort of vibe to them. Kind of sounds like the type of lyrics that some famous yogi, probably inspired her to write. Um, Obviously, Sinead was probably very deep into her Catholic faith at the time, and some of that rubs off on the lyrics. But the music that's going on behind it is just stellar. Oh, geez, just beautiful. Um, it sounds almost like there's Mellotron synthesizer in here, but because it creates this almost like quasi choral effect whenever I hear it, and it just fades in and out of the mix quite often. But yeah, this is a really, really juicy song, and it really, really prepares me for the next song on here. Everyone. Now we finally get to a song that I could gush over for hours, attempting to explain how I feel every second this song passes through my brain. Uh, my ears feel like they are being bathed in this primordial soup, transferring information regarding the entire history of life on Earth and in its entirety of the universe. Um, this is my favorite Massive Attack song of all time. It is the pinnacle of all things that make this musical collective so magical and so medicinal to my body and soul. Horace Andy comes back and delivers a vocal performance that echoes the sound of the great female soul Gaia in a very androgynous vessel with this almost chant-like vibe. And what's really cool is how minimalist these lyrics are, how Horace Andy will even hold on to a single word for a long period of time or a couple of words. I mean, just listen to how this song starts out. My life, your life. By the way, this is also notably the first Massive Attack album to feature lyrics printed in here, as you noticed. Incantation. Or even just later on in the song, just the two words that he sings. Blood ties, blood ties. Ah. And this is after like maybe 2 minutes of music. Just wow, Horace. Wow, Mr. Andy. Yeah, you really are like a man that could lead some, African tribe in some dance with the spirits, with the sun, just looming in the distance, setting and creating, just bathing the entire landscape in light and, making this entire landscape a microcosm of the universe. Like this whole song, like, okay, let's get to the musical part of this song. The song itself starts out with an electric piano playing a single two-chord melody, fed through a delay and echo loop that practically paints a scene by being a timeless beach watching a sunrise or sunset with the waves lapping against the shore. Robert Del Naja actually has something to say on their website. I'll post the link for it that further realizes my beautiful feelings for this song. Regarding the meaning behind the song, this is what Robert Del Naja says. It's the idea of a suspended, beautiful moment. A love song when you just crystallize that love for someone. Just that moment that seems to be held. Very pretty and pretentious at the same time. And then as for what he has to say about the recording of the song, the drums on every when, that was just a kick, rim shot, and hi-hat put through various delays, Doppler effects, and GRM pole filters that basically created a melodic backbone for the track. A lot of people think it's guitar noises, but there is actually not a single guitar sound on that track. And then there's other sounds that appear to be a didgeridoo, but processed with different effects that render it unrecognizable. It's that one effect that comes in every so often. It's like creating a DNA helix in the mix. I was doing some reading up on the Mutronics mutator because of a blog post I had been reading on GRM filters that Massive Attack were using, or Robert Del Naja was using on this album. It appears that on this song, there's a number of instrumental textures where the waveform is being played with in terms of how it's graphed out. And then there's various volume shifts that are used to give the impression of life forms coming in and out of ear's view. Like when Horace Andy sings, Blood and he sings it a second time, it's amplified with this double track ah from his voice that comes fading in on top of that, just riding on top of that wave. So as to make it sound like there's two Andys, but one is chanting that, the one that's chanting that sounds like a different side of his personality, almost to where it's a different person altogether. And then there's another instance on the song where there's what sounds like a sound bowl or, a wind chime that comes in towards the end, where it's just that sound and the two chord piano, dun 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 with the endless delay on it. And some like new age voices mixed in too. Now, the sound bowl that I was mentioning, that's probably what I'm hearing at the very least. I feel, just the morphine and manipulation of sounds on here comes back around to that statement that 3D was talking about when saying that this song is supposed to embody the feeling of communicating the essence of that beautiful feeling that accompanies falling in love and connecting on a soul level, like a twin flame level with someone. It induces this weightless levitation effect and makes it seem timeless. I mean, again, even going back to the artwork, look at exactly where the lyrics are printed right here. And just look at the fact that this glass statue of a person is in this white room here. It's as if to convey the fact that the entire setting of the artwork for this album is set in a room where like life happens, where the people that have engineered and constructed this person did so as to create the sense that again, this is where all life happens, that it happens in this white room, um where like molecules and atoms and DNA and all other microscopic forms, you know where you go levels upon levels, where it's like turtles all the way down. This song really really embodies that. And in fact, later on, just give you a wink wink here, the lyrics to the song Name Taken and the broken glass model pieces here of different limbs um, hint back to this track, but I'll get to that a little bit later. I could pour for hours on how many different places and environments every when teleports me to. But of course, I should move on to the next track and make a separate video analyzing this song individually and on its own terms. I'm definitely going to make that happen. Next song, Special Cases. I remember reading an Amazon review where one person commented on how this song sounded like a King Crimson song? Well, that bass line carrying the song does in fact sound very Tony Levin like. It's just this droning three-note bass sounding very, very menacing, quietly menacing, almost like something from Thrack or maybe even one of King Crimson's 80s albums, Discipline, Beat, Three of a Perfect Pair. Anyways, Sinead O'Connor's lyrics are actually the thing that stands out for me most on the song. I love how Sinead's lyrics are basically a middle finger to feminism, and in a way, they predate the global plague of misandry and Me Too fanaticism that would come nearly a decade and a half later. The lyrics on here, basically lecture to women that they need to stop nagging men and blaming men for shit that women themselves need to take accountability for first. Like the lyrics themselves say something here. Don't tell your man what he can't do right, nor tell him all the things that make you cry, but check yourself for your own shit. And don't be making out like it's all his. Yeah, so take that, Alyssa Milano and all those other bitches out there. Okay, yeah. Obviously, I'm getting a little bit distracted here. But, oh boy, it's too bad that Sinead O'Connor has passed away because I would love to be shaking her hand right now and saying, thank you for writing a song that is pro men, that stands for, the socially awkward men out there that just, you know, have a very difficult time trying to live up to that certain vibrational level so that we can appear to be high value to the women that we want to attract. So, anyways, great song though. I really really love Special Cases, and yeah, the King Crimson element right there is really spot on. Next song up is Butterfly Caught. Now there's two versions of this song. Um Now the studio cut on here is different from the one that is used in the music video. Um, I love this song as it is on on 100th Window, but there's also a part of this song used in the music video that kind of makes me like, well, I mean, I it's just a different version. Um, so I'm just trying to find the part in the lyrics that Robert Del Naja sings here. So, okay, it's that one part of the song where he sings, "Keep smiling for me." Right. Afraid to see, radiate, open lips. Okay, so it's that part of the song where if you watch the music video to it, there's this piano that's playing kind of like the piano in Every When, but with the delay removed from it altogether. It's sounds almost like something that you would hear on a Moby song or maybe even a Seal song. And I like the music video in from a visual standpoint because of the really cool ink effect that is done on Robert Del Naja, where he's just sitting on this bed and you know giving this look of despondency while this ink work starts to create um this transformation in him where he gradually starts turning into what looks like a moth, I believe. Yeah, you got to check out that music video. It's great. Next song, A Prayer for England, another Sinead O'Connor song. Now, here is a song that actually took a long time to grow on me, but again, just goes to show why I love this album so much, why it is my favorite Massive Attack album, because this actually used to be my least favorite song, and I I would almost feel tempted to skip over it because the lyrics that Sinead O'Connor um you know has on here sound pretty basic. In the name of and by the power of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, yeah, more Catholic preaching right there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's so much to love about this song too. Sinead O'Connor's performance, like the singing here, is fantastic. She's singing with a much darker, more cautionary, more urgent tone, one that seems to, show her as if she was sending a public service announcement for all the world to hear on television and radio across the globe. It's like, you must help save the children. you know? Um, I mean, I didn't really do that much looking into like what the background was behind the lyrics, but it's probably got to do something, with like kids in some war, being caught up in some war, like save the children from the blood and the carnage going on in the world. No, I mean, I can definitely sympathize with that. But musically, it's is more important to me. It's much more urgent, much more adrenaline pumping than any of the songs leading up to this point. It's got this crawling, slithering bass line that's really, really fast. I mean, not like thrash metal fast, but it's just it's got this really warbling, almost danceable effect to it. The drums are very frantic, and there's this howling synth, and all the instruments at the same time just maintain this very calm and quiet mood. It's amazing, how balanced out even this song is for sounding, more venomous, more acidic. But again, all this is what makes for another great song on here because it manages to shake the tension up a little bit, seeing as how, it's like every song leading up to this has been kind of narcotic to an effect, to a degree. And then the next song, Small Time Shot Away, brings things back to being more quiet and minimalist. This is the song that has 3D collaborating with 2D, aka Gorillaz frontman Damon Albarn, or Damon Albarn. Interestingly, this song was put together after the two were having a night out drinking, and you can actually hear Del Naja trying to sing while hungover. He really does sound pretty woozy on here. I do like this song nonetheless. It's it pretty much, maintains this very drab, very like, like it gives that um like after the breakup feel to it, where you wake up in the morning and you just feel like, gosh, what the hell am I going to do with my day? Like just really, really depressed, really, really melancholic. Um, it sucks though because Damon Albarn seems strangely absent on here, despite being credited as being Robert Del Naja's um, singing partner on here. That's because his vocals are, in fact, mistaken for background noise. They are reduced essentially to a low hum electric warble. Now, I could make out his voice for like a second or two coming up from the electronic soup. Just a moment of clarity where I knew that it was him. And I could definitely, it was very lucid enough where I knew it was him. But it's probably taken me at least over a dozen times to finally make out his voice. I was kind of pissed off because evidently Robert had brought Damon in to sing on here so as to have fans take the focus off, the misconception that this is a Robert Del Naja solo album. He wanted to make it clear that 100th Window was a Massive Attack album, so he figured, why not bring in, somebody whose moniker basically matches mine, 2D and 3D. And yet, doing this, it's like there must be an outtake of this song where where Damon Albarn actually has a prominent voice on here. And I happen to be a huge Gorillaz fan, so the, like how ingrateful for Robert to just reduce Auburn down to a musically blurry texture on this song. That's kind of rude, Robert. Whatever though, whatever. I do love this song. Next song, Name Taken, is another song with Horace Andy singing on it. The one where he makes the line, fade away, sound like some instruction given to make certain people disappear by having their genetic coding turn them back into carbon. And this song is, in fact, a sequel to Everyone. Now, let's go back here to this part in the booklet. Okay? So, you see that there are these um, glass parts of limbs from that statue. And the lyrics to Name Taken are printed right here. Okay, now, I believe. Okay, so the most obvious reason why this is a sequel to Everyone is because towards the end of this song, it brings back a little clip of Everyone. Now, I definitely do have a theory about this song. It's like if Everyone was about, the coming of new life, of new DNA codes. Name Taken is now like the sound of some futuristic dystopian society. Now, imagine something like, oh, I don't know, like out of Ultraviolet, that 2006 movie with Mila Jovovich, where it's like, you know, the names of these, and I'm just naming Ultraviolet as an example. I mean, I know there's like other dystopian sci-fi movies that I'm not thinking of right now, but or like Gattaca even. Yeah, actually that's a better example. Gattaca. So imagine like the scenario for Name Taken being used um as like a mini movie version of Gattaca. So you have like the DNA codes of people, like blood samples, for example, and it's like their very, very identity is being taken and used for, corruptive reasons. Hence just like looking at the lyrics right here, um, it's like he's making reference to um gunmetal sky, peel away, children play. Um, I mean, I just get the feeling that he's hinting at what it's like to just have your very existence, your very, very life now taken away as a result of like just DNA coding being used for purposes, um, that go on behind the scenes. It's like after that beautiful moment where you fall in love and have tantric sex and your DNA is exchanged as, you know, you feel yourself being elevated from your bubbles and floating above this endless river of life. You know, you know, just as you have merged with infinity, your coding simply becomes information to be commodified on the World Wide Web. And I think, that this song references the title of the album, A Hundredth Window. Del Naja talked about how people compulsively open up multiple windows on their browser, unaware that any of these windows could leak precious information, like cookies, and be stolen from hidden black market entities like fishers, scammers, or catfishers. That is the hundredth window. The one window, the one screen that remains open on your browser that allows those trackers in, that fake avatar that pretends to be the person you are truly looking at and someone that you think you have some familiarity with or you personally knew at one point. And this avatar is stealing information through the screen. Your name and your DNA structure are uploaded into this supercomputer. And just imagine going back to this song, if gaslighting was going on in the relationship, your female lover has now used her body and sold her name, name taken, and then corresponded the DNA to be used as an AI cam girl. Look at, porn stars like Tori Black. I talked about this when I was doing my movie review, actually, for Red Rocket. Considering this is a Massive Attack song, and their lyrics talk about power dynamics and relationships, A Hundredth Window elevates that theme to the level of the virtual internet world, the World Wide Web. So the every when reprise used at the end must be like a narrative hook that circles back to that moment when two lovers were merging the divine ball of light with their physical bodies, and that disillusion into oneness and consciousness, and that now all they have become are just AI images on the internet. Those happy memories and the names that are taken are now commodified as images of eternal love. And regarding the reference to the World Wide Web, the closing track, Anti-Star, I feel has a very, very webbish sound fabric to it, with just that palm muted guitar playing this one chord womp is the main hook of the song. It's got this really sticky sounding delay and echo on who knows what other effects, but it really, really creates that murkiness of the World Wide Web. And the song actually ties in very nicely with the previous track, Name Taken. Um, there's a line in that song where Robert Del Naja says, iconography fucks with me. He is referring to the false idols we worship from internet avatars posing as real people. Look at the title itself. Anti-star could be referencing the morning star and Venus, and therefore its correspondence to Lucifer. More so than the guitar and the rhythm section and, whatever other electronic textures there are in this song, there is also an Egyptian style string orchestra arrangement highlighting the fabric of the song as well. And if anything, it seems to be the single wave driving this song, more so than like the actual staples of Massive Attack's sound. In fact, it seems all that seems to take a back seat to this orchestra, which has some very sweeping, beautiful, and haunting arrangements done, swiftly changing chord progressions and, a very, very windy, swaying type of fluctuation throughout the whole song. You know, there's also sounds of like pedal steel or slide guitar, I think, dousing the song here and there. The feelings that this song conveys appear to go back to how the song's theme is essentially addressing a paradox found in being introspective. It's a song that calls upon humanity to remember its emotional agency amongst computer technology, opening up these infinite windows on our screens to what are otherwise just mundane pleasures. The sweet narcosis, which are the two words that are mentioned frequently throughout the song. There's actually an article. um, Now, this article actually seems to apply a quantum physics um as aspect to the song. It says that an anti-star is actually just another term for a star that has died and become antimatter. So get this. So it says here that antimatter operates like normal matter, but has the opposite charges of our normal matter counterparts. Because of this, when they meet, they completely convert to light, and energy is released. This implies a symmetry of sorts. And yet we seem to exist in a universe dominated by matter. Now, get this. Why an anti-star? No one really took anti-stars to be a serious possibility. For starters, matter should have annihilated our ancient antimatter by now. And if antimatter was present to form a star, then such an annihilation would have been very easy to spot. Yet no such event has ever been seen. And anti-stars would look exactly like normal stars because all the mechanics are the same. Particles may have opposite charges, but that doesn't impact stellar mechanics. So visually, all stars would look the same, and hoping to differentiate an anti-star would seem hopeless. So what this suggests in my interpretation of this song and its connection to the artwork um, is that we are glass body vessels inside, carrying this antimatter charge that can create and destroy in an instant. And as indicated by the glass statue exploding into bits and shards, the Venus spark, the anti-star, um, morning star, another way of describing it, has been overstimulated to the point of numbness from too much pleasure. Pleasure transmitted through the screens of our computers and nowadays our phones. And this was being talked about in 2003. Yeah. Um, and it would be a couple of years, for me anyways, before Facebook would hit the mainstream, and 13 years before I would even start an Instagram account. So, in a way, like the antimatter from the Swiss lab CERN in Angels and Demons, based off the Dan Brown novel, each able body has become a walking charge of this anti-star pursuing pleasure like mindless drones and becoming enslaved to the morning star Lucifer component of this anti-star that can create but also destroy, annihilate. Most people have only learned how to destroy themselves, destroy, um, by endless dopamine addiction and eventually developing the chaser effect from the electronic deluge. So that's the end of the album as it would appear on the surface. But after the song ends at its 8 minute and 17-second length, you have silence for about 30 seconds, after which is followed by this warbling, embryonic like pulse emerging from out of the silent void that is likely like a synth pad in, you know, um, a synth pad loop patch on loop that plays for the next 10 minutes and 53 seconds. Now, I've personally always enjoyed this hidden instrumental. It's not much really. It's just this same pulsing bass that that just constantly fades in and then fades out in volume, maybe a few moments of high notes and played after, you know are played after a while. You start to notice some nice harmonies or like sub bass harmonies underneath the main note. Whoa, 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 whoa. But that's pretty much it. And it honestly closes this album out, making me think, at least, what happens if we just detach from, all electronic influence, our computers, our phones, all screens? Then this hidden track, which is dubbed just LP4, is really just the hidden quantum spark inside of us in its most pure and most unperverted form. That's always been there. It's got no beginning and it's got no end, or it's got both. Hence the reason why it constantly seems to play on this endless loop for, over 10 minutes. It's so peaceful to listen to as well. Like, my gosh. When I was listening to this album during an acupuncture session, I think I made it all the way through this album, but it just really, really reset my brain. Coming to the very, very end of this and just hearing now this near 11-minute instrumental play. It's like I find myself in this great, vast darkness, but it's a very peaceful darkness, and I myself am this light that glows, through all this darkness, just eternal desire, an eternal state of becoming, new realities just waiting around the corner. So finally, that closes my review on 100th Window. Such a an interstellar experience this album is. I love, love, love this CD. I absolutely love 100th Window. I cannot express enough words of praise to say how this is just, for me, the definitely the pinnacle of Massive Attack as far as their their wonderful magic in the history of music. So it's interesting because, um when I got into Massive Attack, it was just, 4 years after this album came out. And, it's like I if it would have been their last album, I would have been perfectly okay. However, in 2010, in the early spring of that year, we would get yet another great marvel of magical sonic landscapes from this Bristol collective. Right. So here now we come to a part of the Massive Attack story, which would result in what up to this point is the final LP to ever be released by this collective. To this point, merely to this point, but it already has been a decade and a half now since Heligoland was released. And this one would be a rather hard left turn, for it would end up becoming a project that would turn out, what was the equivalent of like this fun house in which each song was like its own little playroom with different sonic experiments going on. It is their least trip hop sounding album. And when I first got into this back in February of 2010, it was an odd one for me to get into, though it has been over time one of the most rewarding albums in terms of providing added commission upon its multiple return listens. So it's it definitely is an album that has aged very, very well for me. And yeah, obviously I'm in the minority by this point, but I I stand very, very strongly by Heligoland and defend it for its crazy, um, radical and left field experiments that it explores and dares to go against the grain of other people's expectations for those who have followed this collective since the early 90s. So prior to this album, things have been rather quiet on the Massive Attack front. The only other music activity that they had done between 2003 and 2010 was the soundtrack to a Jet Li movie in 2004 called Unleashed. However, the soundtrack would be given a different name altogether. It would be referred to as Danny the Dog. That was the name of the soundtrack album. I will be doing a separate review for my part 3 of Massive Attack, which I will be doing miscellaneous odds and ends. As I do have to properly listen to this soundtrack album. I know that it is one that a friend of mine from high school, he had listened to it and he loved it. But, I still haven't gotten around to checking that out or watching the movie Unleashed. So, but yeah, other than that, there hasn't really been any other music, and the collective was mostly quiet. I can still remember when Heligoland was released almost out of nowhere, and I remember Psyche was the first song that I had heard, except that it was a remix version of it accompanying a fan-made video. It had a much more grittier, very distorted, almost like a synth wave, dark ambient type of aesthetic to it compared to the final song version that would end up on the CD. So when I ordered the actual CD on Amazon and it arrived in the mail, I went in discovering an album that had a very broad palette of colors and shades never before utilized. It was a pretty eclectic album. It also signals the return of Grant Marshall for the first time since Mezzanine. So that means, along with Horace Andy and Robert Del Naja, of course, um, you have three familiar alumni at the core. So the opening track, Pray for Rain, starts the album off with a much more organic production and song arrangement than was ever imagined by Massive Attack before. You have this synth that sounds like a very ghostly organ that also has like a static flicker to it. Possibly, the effect is running through a Leslie speaker effect as well that, has a slightly faulty tube to it. And then it's followed shortly after by this booming, rolling jazz drum kit that is very low rumbling and has this slight pitter patter hi-hat triplet pattern ending each drum phase. And then there is a drowsy, gauzy lounge piano that plays like every chord is heavy and weighed down by some invisible gravitational malaise affected by some despondent people in the room who just kind of look very, very not like hung over, but just um really, really out of it. Like they're experiencing the negative side of some drug they've been given, some hallucinogenic drug that they've been given, some brainwashing drug. Um, the whole song could be set up in it could set up a scene inside an opium den where a guru is at the podium talking about some great prophecy he has about what he sees happening in the future. And it happens that the prophetic lyrics are sung by TV on the radio vocalist Tunda Adabimp or Tund Anabimp, who has a futuristic soul element as he sings what sounds like experiences he had when visiting some other world perception. And, kind of sounds like something out of that Brit Marling movie, Sound of My Voice, almost. What actually colored my interpretation about this track was one that I found on songmeanings.com by BJZ Blue, where he talks about how this song is about, something going wrong in the mind, leading the mind to become out of control and having their dreams and hope lost. So the lyric, and their eyes change as they learn to see through flames, could mean that the conscious mind is adapting to the chaos of its subconscious self. And then the line, and their necks crane as they turn to pray for rain. That's rain. The rain, as suggested in the title, is meant to put out the fire or the chaos of the mind. It's like putting out the chaos of the mind that Nicolas Cage went through in Mandy when he took um that hallucinogenic drug. So the conscious mind wants relief of whatever is going wrong. And then, there's that one part of the song where it completely shifts tone and mood. And there's that lyric, drops on rocks fall fast and fleeting, which sounds like it's starting to rain and help is coming. Hearts and wings commence to beating. Sounds like the mind is starting to boot up again. Dreams are becoming realized and action is taking place. Now, when it says vision walls fall all revealing, it could mean that as the conscious realizes that reality is not as good as he hoped it would be. Now, I only say that because it restates that as their next crane as they turn to pray for rain part at the end. Now, personally, I've always felt that much of Massive Attack's music and the lyrics, no matter who is singing, and who wrote the lyrics contribute to the Massive Attack sound by creating this soundscape playground of sorts where you know the music just induces me into a hypnosis and guides me through this meditation of sorts that um you know, brings up images and visualizations and, you know, knowings and intuitions. And, that's really the whole point of reviewing Massive Attack's discography is to really nail the point home um, that this is exactly what I love about this music. This is what um, reshapes my frame of the world, my worldview. Um, and it's just brilliant that this guy on songmeanings.com, BJZ Blue, seems to think just like I do in that regard. Um, Robert Del Naja, by the way, on songfacts.com had something interesting to say that I wanted to add here. Telling the Independent, the magazine The Independent, that I can relate to the lyrics in Pray for Rain a lot. Lyrically, it's like a parable, and it kind of reminds me a bit of Cormac McCarthy's 1985 Western novel, Blood Meridian, a kind of crazy apocalyptic Western with a sense of connection with the spiritual world as well, which I really dig. So, yeah, it's the subjective experience of listening to Massive Attack's music um is almost like the mind the mind's ear and the mind's eye engaging in like the sand play therapy of like a Mandela effect, except it's through sonic interplay um between the singing and the music. It is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So while Pray for Rain starts the album off in completely new and uncharted territory, the follow-up track, Babel, instantly anchors me back into familiar trip hop territory. It's already a sphere that I'm already accustomed to now by this point. And the beats that open up this song are some of the busiest and most frantic sounding beats I've ever heard. And it it has this evolution on a continuum where there's like slightly different, subdivisions of the beat shuffling around. It's like a little number machine at work here. Um, but it's very lively and excitable though, and honestly, an auditory aphrodisiac for me hearing it upon the first time. I was just like jumping around in ecstasy when this song came on. And it marks Martina Topley Bird's debut on a Massive Attack album and a Massive Attack song, since she was usually more familiar as being Tricky's muse and obviously backup singer and obviously sometimes lead singer um on Tricky's solo albums for his first like 4 or 5 albums, I believe. Obviously, you can go back to that early part of this video to find out more. um so she contributes 2 vocal performances on 2 songs here. So there's this song, and then later on there's Psyche. Those are the 2 songs that she sang on for Heligoland. Now, to talk about the lyrics for this song, I got to bring up a really cool article here that I discovered some time back. It is from The Atlantic, and it is called "Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid." And it has a very meta-like illustration of a Babel-like tower with some slight disintegration of pixels within the architecture of the building. So there's one particular paragraph that I gotta read here that best supports what I have to say about the lyrics to this song. So the story of Babel is the best metaphor that I have found for what happened to America in the 2010s and for the fractured country we now inhabit. Something went terribly wrong very suddenly. We are disoriented, unable to speak the same language or recognize the same truth. We are cut off from one another and from the past. Now, it obviously gets more into like the politics of red America and blue America, but you could also talk about um social media. In fact, I'm gonna give a film example right here. Alex Garland's 2022 movie Men. That movie shows the various different dynamics that go on between men and women, how sometimes there is enough overlap that the two coalesce together and find a common ground of understanding, and how there are times where there is conflict going on. And Rory Kinnear is just incredible in that film. He plays like 7 different characters with different degrees of like CGI manipulation and whatever, but um, it just goes to show that the character Harper, then too, played by Jesse Buckley, um, is kind of like the voice of Martina Topley Bird and her lyrics here, because the Babel-like scenario of communication presented here, that through Martina's singing, is that she talks about, the context of how a relationship seems to be, um, you know, these two towers that, where there is like a psychic command post to both the male and the female energetic architecture, and they're each communicating, transmitting their ideologies, preach, sometimes preaching, other times actually having a conversation. And, it's the struggle to have a mutual conversation where you actually, um, you know, can be invited inside the other person's tower to really know like what the person is underneath. And I think the song Psyche later on goes another level deeper. But I'll definitely talk about that when I get to that song. There's a lyric in there that I gotta highlight in particular. Was it how she kissed you and then dismissed you? So she's basically referring to how the woman was being manipulative of the man's views regarding, his sensual, carnal, physical need as being his ideology for communicating to his partner, and the fact that, her ideology of feeling and intuition, which is part of the construct of female architecture, was manipulating to the point of like gaslighting so as to completely deny his needs altogether. I actually just finished watching a really cool French movie called Lila Says that um provides a really nice framework that honestly the song Babel would have gone great for that movie. Although um cheeky enough, the song Run by the French electronica duo Air was used in that movie. I won't tell you what scene though. You got to check out that movie for yourself. But so yeah, anyways, that's definitely my take on Babel. And musically, this song is just brilliant. I've often forgotten how like the it's it's the first half is really dominated by Topley Bird's vocal performance, but then you have like this remaining 2 minutes of the song that is like this really cool instrumental that has like a slight glitchy feel to it, almost like an oval song, something off of his System Itch or Discount 94 Discount album. But yeah, so two very, very powerful tracks to kick off this album so far. Splitting the Atom, then the next track thrusts me right back once again into alien territory. Yeah, but it's a really cool track. It was a sleeper of a track, but over time it became quite the attention grabber because of how cartoon-like it is and how it actually reminds me of a song that could have been used in a Gorillaz music video. Well, and that's because I also thought that I was hearing Damon Albarn singing one of the vocal parts, but it's actually Robert Del Naja again. And the second time, too, that I thought it was one singer and not the other since Small Time Shot Away. It's the lyric part where he's singing incandescent lighted doors in adolescent menopause. But yeah, no, that's that is Damon Albarn. I mean, I'm sorry, that is Robert Del Naja singing. However, that is Damon Albarn playing those Warner Brothers like cartoonish keyboards on there. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. And then Grant Marshall sings again for the first time in 12 years on a Massive Attack album. That familiar voice that automatically reminds me of Rising Sun again. Um, except that his singing is much more ephemeral now. And it definitely is a little bit more like easier on the ears, I guess you could say. I mean, it's definitely not dark and threatening the way that he sounded on like the title track from Mezzanine. Um, Horace Andy is also singing on here too, and he, of course, has the most memorable line in this song. It's easy, don't let it go. Track number 4, Girl, I Love You, then, is the only song on the album, ironically, featuring Horace Andy singing lead vocals. How about that? Following after the previous song where he only has just like this one little blurb that he sings. There's not much to say about this song, Girl, I Love You, except that it actually just sounds like the most straightforward song on this whole album. It's got a very, very nice, groovy, you know, like indie rock type of element to it. Although no electric guitars per se, just like this, you know, um, thumping bass and a very, very noticeable brass arrangement on here. But this is a good song too. And then Psyche, as I said earlier, is definitely a spiritual sequel to Babel. It's essentially about the inside of a person, his or her intentions, dreams, and desires, and the world of metaphor and the inner world that is represented here. Now, the song itself, the construction of it has a very intriguing history because according to 3D, Psyche was inspired by Steve Reich because it is actually samples of a classical CD that Del Naja scratched up and taken, parts of it that were recorded on MP3s, I'm guessing, and use that as the foundation. Definitely something that reminds me of Marcus Pop's music making techniques. The acoustic guitar, however, and that ghost, that very, very airy, uprooted synth melody, those were recorded as real instrumental arrangements on top of that. And once again, Martina Topley Bird offers up a much, a very, very sultry performance, though it's a little bit more darker, a little bit more Lilith-like than than her singing on Babel. So my one disappointment is that this song is too short. I would have loved to have heard it go on for at least 5 minutes or more, but it's only just like trimmed down to 3.5 minutes. And pardon this last second um edited insert here for this song analysis, but I just had some additional thoughts that I wanted to go into depth with here with this particular song. When I listen to Psyche, I notice that it has a narrative of sorts about the inner landscape of a person once you're invited inside that other person's Babel temple of social ideations and values. The whole soundscape of this song is like entering into some ancient cave from like the beginnings of the human species. And you see like these paintings of different deities that are worshipped that are like these outward reflections of like different dimensions of the self. It's almost like it's painting a picture out of like a Joseph Campbell book. Like the Jungian vibe of this song comes off very, very much so that um it just fascinates me more and more every time I come back to this song. It's really hard to decipher what lyrics mean, but it seems to convey a subjective set of symbols used to describe processes of the psyche, order and chaos, control and submission, inner and outer. There's this all these polarities that are working all at once. And yet these polarities, merge together in a singularity, which is what I think, gives particularly that synth that's used, which sounded very, very ghostly, like almost like that synth is the music of the spirit coming out um to perform this ritual with inside the inner temple of this person, you know to show the very dualities that the soul strives to find balance for. It's just amazing. Um and yeah, I think personally, you should go back, listen to this song, and tell me what you think in particular, because I really believe that this is not a far-fetched theory. And definitely not a far-fetched theory at all. It's like I'm looking at the lyrics right now. Now, the first line, I'm looking for you in the woods tonight. So the woods is definitely a metaphor for the inner landscape of the psyche. Yeah. You know, looking for you in my flashlight, I'm searching, and that flashlight could very well be like a metaphor for like a projection. Um, and just like going down the lyrics themselves, um, like there's times where the lyrics, get darker and more like menacing. Lyrics like ridicule, they won't allow, quench abuse and let love flower, rip the cage out of your chest, let the chaos rule the rest, show without showing, what you know about knowing, twig snap, eye catch, no canoe, only you and me, above the old TLC. It's like, the lyrics in this particular part seem to convey like the uncertainty that comes with like discovering new things that emerge from out of the darkness, out of the shadows within that psyche. Yeah. And like that line that she repeats at the very, very end of the song, as I was set to fall in, as I was set to fall in, um, is her implying that she's prepared for this, that she doesn't mind, being immersed into the unknown. So, yeah, beautiful song, really beautiful song. Love Psyche, definitely a highlight on this album. But now we get to one of the oddest songs on not just this album, but the entirety of Massive Attack's discography as a whole. Flat of the Blade is one song, that I have a hard time deciding on whether it's a song that I really like or not. It's like my mood changes quite a bit with this. It's just because it has this oddball percussion effect that sounds similar to like a cement mixer or some industrial machine with like, you know, there's like these nuts and bolts on an assembly line that are shaking. Like, I don't know, there's like a broken belt conveyor or, it's like, um, there's like a metal crusher that's malfunctioning and not doing its job properly. It's it's just very disorienting. I'm not gonna lie. Paradise Circus remedies that problem though by bringing in a breathy piano-led song, which has a flamenco-like flavor to it. And Hope Sandoval from Mazzy Star is the main singer on here. She brings a very sad country girl type mood along with those hand claps and later on sweeping string arrangements. It's a song that's gotten just as much airplay as Teardrop has and has even inspired some TikTok videos out there for sure. Like, I think there's a dubstep remix of this song that became popular on TikTok and other social media platforms. And then we finally have a song led by Robert Del Naja to remind me that the core of Massive Attack is still alive and well. Rush Minute has a very nice pulsating drum beat and spacious guitar with some very complex piano playing. It actually sounds like a New Order song that would have come out on like Waiting for the Sirens Call, which did come out like 5 years before Heligoland came out, so that doesn't surprise me. I guess apparently, according to Del Naja himself, this song was meant to have a punk new wave feel. Like it's got a little bit of Bela Lugosi's Dead as far as the beat in it. The song with the line, I wanna be clean, but I gotta get high, is a general observation, he says. For myself and other people I know, we look for those moments of absolute lucidity and sobriety, and then you find you need to completely get off your, what, to make any sense of that. And it's a battle, it's not a battle with addiction so much as it's trying to moderate everything. That maybe explains why that little instrumental breakdown at the end of each verse um, is kind of supposed to create this like almost like a Telephone Tel Aviv vibe to it, like the song Lotus Above Water. It's got that very, very Zen like sound to it, to indicate in the narrative this guy who is in fact trying to, you know, raise his vibration above the gross addictions that have been running his life and have been, drowning him constantly. Bad habits that have been following around him for years, maybe even decades. So finally, now with the next track, after a couple of teases with the infamous Gorillaz frontman not really appearing visibly and vocally, we finally now have Damon Albarn getting his chance to shine for real, singing on the song Saturday Come Slow. It's a very, very different number for him, even though I can definitely hear slight nods to his Gorillaz work, especially in the acoustic guitar, the main acoustic guitar melody. I feel like this song lends itself to having a symphonic element to it, even though I don't really know if there's any orchestra. I think there's an orchestra on this song. It has a chamber folk influence to it that reminds me of something by like the National or Fleet Foxes. But yeah, Damon Albarn has a great performance on this song, especially, the parts where he sings, "Do you love me?" Yeah, very, very urgent sounding. It's like if like Feel Good Incorporated or On Melancholy Hill were given more of a more gothic sort of vibe to it altogether. So finally, then, we are brought to the the monument building climax of this album, a near 8-minute climactic number called Atlas Air, a number that shows that Massive Attack can end an album on a note that makes you feel like the world has changed into something different than before. And I hear that as a positive thing, given all the music ingredients going into this epic romp. The main melody is this organ playing a repetitive leitmotif pattern with slight variations popping up here and there throughout the length of this one. And each time too, after the verses, there's a slightly more gauzy sound mix to it. It's almost like the melody stretches into this panoramic echo soundscape as if it's getting pushed more into the background, and you're just hearing more of like the low pass filter ambient element of that melody. Yeah. It's like it's getting swallowed up by this surface level of noise and distortion, subtly building up to a grand finish. And oh my gosh, Robert Del Naja. Oh man, he's definitely brings out one of his most soulful melodic singing parts to this song to date, especially in the line, sells the bill, you pay the bills, sells the bill, mouths to fill, on Boeing jets, in the sunset make glowing threads. That particular part right there is followed then by this wild blizzard of exploding fuzzy synth lines, which which carries this song to its you know its climax that really embodies the title right there. It makes you feel like you just saw a sonic albatross fly away far into the distance. I personally like some of the things that are said about this song in the forums that I found here. Like in this article from the Independent, he Robert Del Naja talks about how Atlas Air was meant to be slightly schizophrenic, that it has this Middle Eastern drum part and this very analog organ part, which also felt like it could have been slightly Turkish but European as well. And the drums disco but slightly Arabic. And then obviously the keys at the end just going off electronically in a more twisted fashion. The lyrics in particular, he says there's a lot of mixed messages in there. And this was a song about change direction and a few times. This was a song that changed direction a few times. It ended up being about rendition, about secret flights and torture, but it's not really something that's easy to sing about. Some of it actually sung from the point of view of those who actually empower themselves and actually are the perpetrators of those crazy situations. It's like stepping into different shoes. It's kind of ironic, like, let's go on a holiday to a secret prison we've got lined up for you as a package deal. Well, you know, that probably explains why, well, this song would kind of be perfect if it was used in a Mila Jovovich movie. Like, it would be perfect for a techno thriller starring either Mila Jovovich or Angelina Jolie, where there's like a computer, like a cyber terrorist group that imprisons uh the Avenger that is trying to take down the criminal or the syndicate that he or she is a part of. I almost makes me think a little bit of the movie Black Hat, a little bit of the movie Ghost in the Shell, and um an escape takes place in which one of those female leads gets on a plane to escape from that prison with like the special where the flight recorder is like this special cybernetic program that is used to help um, bring justice and peace and freedom once again to the cyber world, and free information for all, once again, for better or for worse. But whatever, the song caps off Heligoland wonderfully. In fact, since I've got that article pulled up, I should also read what the actual title Heligoland refers to. And it says here, I was watching Shadow of the Vampire, which, I've seen myself, a Willem Dafoe movie, which was partly shot or partly based on the Heligoland Islands. And when the word came up on the screen, I thought, wow, I love that. Then, when I was doing my research, I realized that the place had quite a lot of really weird and wonderful history. Like, one of the meanings of the name is Holy Island, which is obviously very poetic in this day and age. And I love the fact that the British tried to detonate the biggest subnuclear bomb ever, called the Big Bang, on the island just after the Second World War. The actual destruction of the islands was thought of as an acceptable consequence on the detonation, which I thought was mental. Now, okay, so since we've reached the end of the musical part of this album, I figured I should bring up the artwork because Del Naja also talks about the artwork here. To be honest, I've mostly been coerced back into painting either by Banksy or by James Lavelle. The minstrel on the front cover, I'm guessing he's referring to this, represents this tendency to recreate a fictional reality to replace real reality. Probably explains like the mechanical like nature of like the gears behind her eyes here. Um, that's what's happening now. You create these talent shows and these reality TV shows, and you start to replace reality with reality, but the reality you're looking at is actually quite manufactured. And then the black and gray rainbow came about because I noticed that rainbows are popping up everywhere, all over people's advertising. It felt that in the manual for the recession, someone had gone, add color to your advertising. If you can, add a rainbow. It'll cheer everyone up and they'll start spending their money again. So that's why I thought, I'm going to desaturate the rainbow and present it as it really is. This rainbow is not going to make you happy. There is no pot of gold. So probably like some Sagittarian theme going on there where it's like, this album is interpreting like, the negative aspect of that astrological archetype where, you know, you have these people traveling in this vessel ship right here. Here, and I'll actually switch the light on. So, like, you had these people in this vessel right here, and you think that they're, off pursuing some great fortune, for their own capitalistic work that they've done, but really they're just heading towards, a dead end. And I like how these two figures right here, they kind of like embody like some of the themes in Babel and in Psyche, as I was talking about earlier, how like you see these two figures that are, you know, they're showing like these you know, like gel like colors to kind of like enhance some auric like energy in each of these individuals. But then you see like the skulls underneath here too, and you see um like the expressions that are being given here imply that like, an exchange of air um is being exchanged as far and certain truths are being expressed in different languages. um but it's like the air that's being filled between these two individuals is being turned toxic, and hence why their heads show the exposure of their skulls underneath. Ironically, there is a Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode called Babel, which involves this toxin that takes over the Deep Space Nine station and causes everybody to start speaking in these strange metaphors that make no sense and, have no logical grounding in getting, people to understand what each other are saying. And I almost wonder if that was kind of an inspiration for this particular album art right here, but given more of like a cyberpunk aesthetic to it. I mean, even this just looked very, very cyberpunk looking to me. Yeah. But yeah, so there we go. We've we've done it. This is the end of my full discography review on Massive Attack's 5 LPs. So, I am thankful if you have made it this far. It has been a very long journey. But I have just had to show in as much, intelligible detail as possible just how much I love this musical collective and, how I think that you need to take your time to, add them to your Spotify list or whatever you use as your music platform for exploring new artists. But absolutely, check out Massive Attack. And particularly these three albums that I reviewed in this part two segment right here. Now, there is going to be a part three. It's going to be a lot shorter, and it's going to focus on like some of the other odds and ends, like random songs that I wasn't able to fit because um, I don't have enough experience with those songs yet. So that one is probably going to be a little bit further down the line. I'm going to be going back and doing some more movie reviews again, until, I can get Massive Attacks, um, the rest of Massive Attack's work to sink in better so that, I, can express, you know, the feeling as my memory cells have embedded as far as like the um auditory data banks are concerned. So as always, I'm promoting Mega Media Exchange here. They sell CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays for, as less as like 74 cents. I actually just bought the three Fantastic Four movies, the two with Jessica Alba and the reboot from 2015 with Miles Teller. And I got, like I paid less than $4 for those all together. So yeah. Um, and that is all for today. So see you on the flip side of the reel, or considering this is a discography review, flip side of the disc, flip side of the CD, and ciao.